Caleb Dawson's hand went to his revolver, but his heart stopped him. A woman knelt in the dirt beside his barn, cradling his 5-year-old son against her chest. Sam's lips were cracked white. His eyes were closed. The July heat pressed down like a furnace, and the boy wasn't moving. "Put him down," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "Put my boy down." The woman looked up. No fear. No apology. "He was dying in your field. You want to shoot me? Shoot me after he wakes up." Behind them, 9-year-old Rosie screamed. If you want to follow Caleb and his children to the end of this story, subscribe to our channel and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Caleb holstered the gun and dropped to his knees. He grabbed Sam's face with both hands. The boy's skin burned under his palms, dry, no sweat. That was wrong. Even Caleb knew that was wrong. "How long?" he demanded. "I found him 20 minutes ago," the woman said. Her hands moved steady, pressing a wet cloth to Sam's neck. "Face down by your fence line. No shade, no water." "He was supposed to be inside." "He wasn't." Rosie shoved past Caleb and threw herself at the woman. "Get off him! Get away from my brother!" The woman didn't flinch, didn't let go. "Your brother needs cool water and shade. You want to help him or you want to fight me?" Rosie froze. Her fists stayed balled at her sides. Caleb recognized that look, the same one she wore the night Martha died. Terror dressed up as rage. "Rosie," Caleb said, "get water from the well, cold as you can, now." Rosie ran. The woman shifted Sam, gently moving him into the shadow of the barn. She pulled something from a small leather pouch, dried bark, pale and thin. She crushed it between her fingers, mixed it with water from a canteen, and pressed it to Sam's lips. "What is that?" Caleb asked, his voice sharp. "Willow bark. Brings the fever down." "You a doctor?" "I'm a woman who's buried enough people to know how to keep the living alive." Caleb wanted to argue. He wanted to shove her away and hold his boy himself. But her hands were sure. Her eyes were calm. And Sam's chest rose and fell in her arms with a rhythm Caleb had been too scared to check for. Rosie came back with the bucket. Water sloshed over the sides. The woman soaked a cloth and laid it across Sam's forehead. Then another across his chest. Then she waited. 3 minutes. 5. Sam's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved. No sound came out, but his fingers curled into the fabric of the woman's sleeve and held on. "There you are," she whispered. "There you are, sweet boy." Sam opened his eyes. He looked up at the stranger's face, and he didn't scream, didn't pull away. He stared at her with an expression Caleb hadn't seen on his son's face in 18 months. Trust. Caleb sat back on his heels. His hands were shaking. "He needs to stay cool the rest of the day," the woman said. "Small sips of water, no food until tonight, and someone needs to watch him." "I watch him," Rosie said fiercely. "I always watch him." The woman met Rosie's eyes, held them. "I know you do. You've been doing a brave job." Rosie's chin trembled. She looked away. Caleb carried Sam inside and laid him on the bed. The boy curled onto his side, eyes already closing. Rosie climbed up beside him, one hand on his back, guarding. The woman waited on the porch. She hadn't asked to come in. Caleb stepped out and closed the door behind him. He studied her properly for the first time. Thin, but not frail. Her dress was faded, patched at the elbows. Her boots were cracked from walking. Dark hair pulled back tight. No wedding ring. "Name?" he said. "Clara Whitfield." "Where'd you come from, Clara Whitfield?" "Silver Falls. Before that, a mining camp outside Cripple Creek." "Husband?" "Dead." She said it flat, the way people said it when they'd already screamed about it in private. "Mine collapsed 8 months ago. Took Thomas and 14 other men. I taught school after that until the camp closed." "No family?" "No." "Where are you headed?" Clara looked out at the land at the heat shimmering off the dry grass. Wherever someone needs a pair of hands. Caleb crossed his arms. I didn't ask for help. No, sir. Your son asked for it. He just couldn't say it out loud. That landed hard. Caleb felt it in his chest. One night, he said. Barn loft. You can have supper and breakfast. Then you move on. Clara nodded once. Thank you. She didn't grovel, didn't cry, didn't make promises. She picked up her small bag and walked toward the barn like she'd been sleeping in strange barns her whole life. Maybe she had. Caleb didn't sleep that night. He sat in the chair beside Sam's bed and listened to his boy breathe. Rosie slept curled against her brother, one arm thrown across him. He thought about Martha, about how she would have handled this. She would have invited the woman in without blinking, set another plate, asked questions gently. Martha had been like that open where Caleb was closed, warm where he ran cold. 18 months since the fever took her. 18 months of burning food, of Rosie growing too old too fast, of Sam shrinking into silence. The boy had barely spoken since the funeral. Single words. Nods. Sometimes nothing at all. Doc Harper said it was grief. Said it would pass. It hadn't passed. At dawn, Caleb smelled coffee. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. Clara stood at the stove, sleeves rolled above her elbows. Bacon crackled in the pan. Biscuits sat golden on a cloth. The coffee was strong and dark steam curling upward. I found supplies in your pantry, she said. Hope you don't mind. Caleb minded. He minded that a stranger was in his wife's kitchen using his wife's pans, standing where Martha used to stand. He minded that the house smelled alive for the first time since winter. Rosie appeared in the doorway. She looked at the food, looked at Clara. Her face hardened. We don't need your charity, Rosie said. It's not charity, Clara said. It's breakfast. Papa can cook. Clara glanced at Caleb. Something almost like a smile crossed her face. Caleb felt heat rise in his neck. Rosie, he said. Sit down. But, sit. Rosie sat. She crossed her arms and stared at her plate like it had insulted her. Then Sam walked in. He moved slowly, still weak from the heat. He climbed into his chair, looked at the biscuits, looked at Clara. His hand reached out and took one. He bit into it, and for a moment his whole body went still. He ate the entire biscuit. Then another. Then he drank a cup of milk without stopping. Rosie watched her brother eat, her arms slowly uncrossed. Good biscuits, Rosie muttered. She didn't look at Clara when she said it. But she said it. One night became two. Two became five. Caleb told himself it was because of Sam. The boy needed watching, and Clara knew what she was doing. She checked his temperature morning and night. She kept him cool, kept him drinking, kept him fed. But it was more than that. Clara moved through the house the way rain moves into cracked earth. Quiet, steady, filling gaps Caleb hadn't known were there. She mended the curtain Martha had left half-finished. She scrubbed the stove until it gleamed. She washed clothes and hung them in the sun, and they came back smelling like summer grass. Sam followed her. Not like a lost puppy, like a shadow. Wherever Clara moved, Sam moved 3 steps behind, watching her hands, watching her face. When she kneaded dough, he stood on a stool beside her and pressed his small fists into the flour. He didn't speak, but he was present in the way he hadn't been for months. On the 5th morning, Clara reached for a bowl on a high shelf. Sam tugged her skirt and pointed. The blue one, Clara asked. Sam nodded. Your mama's bowl. Sam nodded again. His eyes were glassy. Clara took it down carefully, held it in both hands. It's beautiful, she said. We'll use it for the biscuit dough. That way she's part of breakfast. Sam placed both hands on the bowl. Then he looked up at Clara, and for one breath his lips parted. No words came. But something shifted in his eyes. a door cracking open. Caleb saw it from the hallway. He gripped the doorframe and turned away before anyone noticed his face. Saturday. Caleb rode into town for supplies. The heat was thick dust rising off the road in pale clouds. He tied his horse outside the mercantile and walked in. Mrs. Ida Fenton was waiting. She was always waiting. "Caleb Dawson," she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Buying for two these days. Buying for my family, same as always." Mrs. Fenton adjusted her gloves. "I hear you've taken in a woman. A stranger. She's helping with the children. Is that what we're calling it?" Mrs. Fenton's smile didn't reach her eyes. "My niece Rebecca is 22, Caleb. Good family, good values, the kind of woman Martha would have approved of." Caleb's jaw locked. "Martha's not here to approve of anything." "Exactly my point. People are watching Caleb. A widow under your roof with your children. What kind of example does that set? The kind where my kids get fed." Mrs. Fenton leaned closer. "Judge Pritchard was asking about you at church. About the children's welfare." Caleb went still. "The judge has no business with my children." "He has business with everyone's children. That's his job." She patted Caleb's arm. "I'm only looking out for you, dear." She walked away. The air felt colder despite the heat. Caleb loaded his supplies in silence. The storekeeper wouldn't meet his eyes. That evening, Clara sat on the porch mending a shirt. Rosie was inside reading aloud to Sam from a book Clara had produced from her bag. Caleb sat down heavily. Clara looked at him. "Town trouble?" she asked. "Nothing I can't handle. People talk about me." It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't answer. Clara's needle moved steady through the fabric. "I can go," she said. "You say the word, I'll be gone by morning." "Nobody asked you to go?" "Nobody has to. I know the sound of a town making up its mind." Caleb stared at the dry field. "Rosie's eating again. Sam held a bowl today. Martha's bowl." Clara's needle paused. Just for a second. "That's not nothing," Caleb said. "No," Clara agreed softly. "It's not nothing." Inside, Rosie's voice stumbled over a word. Sam made a sound, not a word, but a sound like he was trying to help. Rosie corrected herself and kept reading. Clara and Caleb listened. Neither moved. The sunset bled orange across the valley, and for one moment the silence between them wasn't empty. It was full. The breakthrough came on the 8th night, and it came with screaming. Caleb jolted awake. Sam's voice, raw, terrified, ripped through the house. Caleb threw off the blanket and ran. Clara got there first. She was already on the bed, pulling Sam into her arms. The boy thrashed, eyes wide but seeing nothing. His mouth opened and closed around sounds that weren't words. "Sam," Clara said firmly. "Sam, you're home. You're safe. Feel my hands, I'm right here." Caleb stood in the doorway helpless. He wanted to push forward to grab his son, but Clara's arms were steady and Sam was already quieting. Clara began to hum. Low, soft. An old melody, nothing fancy. Sam's fists unclenched. His breathing slowed. His head dropped against Clara's shoulder and his body went limp with exhaustion. Rosie stood behind Caleb. He hadn't heard her come up. She was watching Clara hold her brother. Her face was unreadable, not angry, not grateful. Something deeper. Something she didn't have a name for. "She knew what to do," Rosie whispered. Caleb looked down at his daughter. "Yeah. Mama used to hold him like that. Same way. Same sound." Caleb's throat closed. Rosie turned and walked back to her room. She didn't slam the door. She closed it quietly, which was somehow worse. 2 days later, Judge Harlan Pritchard rode up to the house. He didn't dismount. Sat tall in the saddle coat, buttoned despite the heat hat brim shadowing his eyes. He smiled the way men smiled when they held cards they hadn't shown yet. "Afternoon, Caleb." "Judge." "Heard about your boy's spell. Heat's been rough this summer. He's fine. Glad to hear it. Pritchard's eyes moved to the house, to the curtains in the windows, to the laundry on the line. Looks like you've had some help. I have. The Whitfield woman. Clara. Pritchard leaned forward in the saddle. You know I have a responsibility to the children of this county, Caleb. When concerns arise, whose concerns? Citizens. Good people who worry about the welfare of motherless children. My children are not motherless. They have me. Pritchard's smile thinned. A father is a fine thing, but the court looks at the whole picture: stability, propriety, moral guidance. He tipped his hat. Just a friendly visit. No need for alarm. He turned his horse and rode off slowly, deliberately. Caleb watched until the dust settled. Clara stepped onto the porch. I heard. He's fishing. He's not fishing, Caleb. He's circling. I know the difference. Clara's voice dropped. I've seen men like him before. In Silver Falls, a judge took 3 children from a widow because she worked in a saloon. Those children never came home. Caleb's blood went cold. I won't be the reason they come for yours, Clara said. That night, Caleb walked to Martha's grave. The cottonwood stood black against the sky. Stars burned white above. He knelt in the dry grass and pressed his hand to the stone. I don't know what I'm doing, Martha, he said. The kids need her. Sam needs her. But the whole town's turning, and that judge, he'll use any excuse. The wind moved through the cottonwood. Leaves rustled like whispered conversation. I can't lose them. I'd rather die than lose them. He stayed until the moon climbed high. Then he walked home with his mind made up. Morning. Clara was packing before Caleb said a word. She'd heard the judge. She knew the math. She folded her clothes neatly, placed them in her bag, and set it by the door. Caleb stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, trying to make the words sound right. They wouldn't, so he said them plain. Clara, I think it's best if... I know. She didn't look up. You don't have to explain. It's not about you. I know that too. The judge... Caleb. She looked at him then. Her eyes were steady, but her hands had stopped moving. You're protecting your children. That's exactly what you should do. He wanted to argue with her, wanted her to fight. She didn't. She picked up the bag and walked to the porch. The morning stage comes through at 10, she said. I'll walk to the road. I'll drive you. No. It's better if you don't. Caleb felt something rip behind his ribs. Not sharp. Slow. Like a seam pulling apart thread by thread. Sam sat on the kitchen floor holding Martha's blue bowl. He watched Clara walk toward the door. His grip on the bowl tightened until his knuckles went white. Rosie stood at the hallway entrance. She hadn't said a word all morning. Her fists were at her sides, clenched the way they'd been the day Clara arrived. Clara crouched in front of Sam. You be brave, Sam Dawson. You hear me? You be brave. Sam's lips trembled. He reached out and touched Clara's face. One finger. One. Light as a moth. Clara closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. She stood, nodded to Caleb, and walked out. The screen door closed behind her. Silence. Caleb gripped the back of a chair. He couldn't breathe right. He told himself it was the heat. Then Rosie moved. She walked to her father, slow, deliberate, and stood right in front of him. She looked up with eyes too old for 9 years. Papa, she said. Her voice cracked. Sam said a word last night. Caleb blinked. What? After the bad dream. When she was holding him. After you went back to bed. Rosie's chin trembled. He said her name, Papa. He said Clara. He hasn't said a new name since Mama died. The room tilted. And this morning, Rosie went on. Tears falling. Now fists finally opening. When I woke up, he was standing by her door. just standing there, waiting for her, the way he used to wait for Mama. Caleb sank into the chair. "I tried to be enough," Rosie whispered. "I tried to be his mama and his sister and everything, but I'm 9, Papa. I can't do it all." Her whole body shook. "Don't send her away. Please. I know I was mean. I know I said she wasn't Mama. She's not Mama. But she's something. She's something we need." Caleb pulled his daughter into his arms. She buried her face in his chest and sobbed, not the angry, stiff tears of a child trying to be strong. Real tears. A little girl's tears. The tears she'd been holding for 18 months. Over Rosie's shoulder, Caleb saw Sam. The boy stood in the kitchen doorway, Martha's blue bowl still in his hands, his eyes fixed on the empty porch where Clara had been. His lips moved. One word. Barely a whisper. "Stay." Caleb set Rosie down. He grabbed his hat. "Papa." Rosie wiped her face. "Watch your brother," Caleb said. His voice was rough as gravel. "I'll be right back." He hit the porch at a run. The road stretched long and dusty under the morning sun. A quarter-mile ahead, Clara walked alone, bag over her shoulder, not looking back. Caleb ran. The heat slammed into him. Dust kicked up around his boots. His lungs burned. He hadn't run like this since the night Martha died, since he'd sprinted for the doctor who came too late. He wasn't too late this time. "Clara." She stopped. Turned slowly. Her face was wet, but her jaw was set, ready for whatever came. Caleb reached her, breathing hard. He stood there, hat in his hands, and for a moment words failed him. "My boy said your name," Caleb said. First new word in 18 months. Clara's breath caught. "And my daughter, my stubborn, brave, angry daughter just stood in my kitchen and told me she can't do it alone anymore." His voice broke. "She's 9 years old, Clara. 9. And she's been carrying this family on her back because I was too broken to see it." Clara pressed her hand to her mouth. "I don't know what this is," Caleb said. "I don't know what we are, but I know my children need you. And I know sending you away is the worst mistake I've almost made." "The judge. I'll handle the judge. The town. I'll handle the town." Clara searched his face, looking for doubt. She didn't find it. "I don't want to cause trouble, Caleb." "You didn't cause trouble. You caused breakfast. You caused my son to hold his mama's bowl again. You caused my daughter to cry like a child instead of carrying the world." He put his hat back on. "Come home, Clara." The word hung between them. Home. Clara wiped her eyes. She looked back down the road, the direction of the stage of strangers of sleeping in barns and walking alone. Then she looked at Caleb. "Okay," she said. Simple, quiet, brave. They walked back together side by side, the summer sun climbing hot and high above them. When they reached the porch, Rosie was standing there, Sam pressed against her leg. Sam saw Clara. His face changed. Not a smile, something before a smile, something deeper. He lifted Martha's blue bowl toward her with both hands. Clara knelt down. She took the bowl gently, the way you hold something sacred. Rosie unclenched her fists. She reached out and took Clara's sleeve, held on. "You came back," Rosie said softly. Clara looked at the girl who had fought her for 8 days. "I came back." Caleb stood behind them. His family gathered on the porch of a house that had been dying. The heat still pressed down. The dust still blew. The town still watched. But inside the oven was still warm, and the blue bowl sat on the table waiting. Clara didn't unpack her bag that first night back. She set it by the barn door, open ready. Caleb noticed. He didn't say anything. Some things needed time more than words. Morning came hot and early. Caleb was fixing the fence line when he heard something that stopped him cold. Laughter. Not Rosie's sharp, guarded laugh. Sam's. A small rusty sound like a gate that hadn't swung in years. Caleb gripped the fence post and listened. Clara was in the kitchen. She'd put flour on Sam's nose. The boy touched it, looked at his reflection in the back of a spoon, and laughed again. Rosie sat at the table, pretending not to watch. But she was watching. Her eyes tracked Clara's every move, still measuring, still deciding. "You want to try?" Clara asked Rosie, holding out the dough. "I know how to make biscuits." "I'm sure you do. Show me." Rosie hesitated. Then she stood, rolled up her sleeves, and pressed her hands into the dough. Hard, angry almost. Clara didn't correct her. She just watched. "Gentler," Clara said after a moment. "Biscuits don't like being punished." Rosie's hands slowed. Her shoulders dropped an inch. "Mama used to say that." Clara went still. She was right. She was right about everything. Then she must have been a remarkable woman. Rosie looked at Clara sideways, testing. She was. She was better than anyone. "I believe that," Clara said quietly. "I'm not trying to be her Rosie. I couldn't if I wanted to." Rosie's jaw tightened. She pulled her hands from the dough, wiped them on her dress, and walked out without another word. But she didn't slam the door. Progress lived in small things. Sam tugged Clara's sleeve and pointed at the dough. Clara smiled. "You want to finish?" Sam nodded. He pressed his small hands in gentle the way Clara showed him. When the biscuits came out golden, Sam carried one to Rosie on the porch. Rosie took it. Didn't say thank you. But she ate every crumb. Caleb watched from the yard tools, forgotten in his hands. His chest ached with something he refused to name. That afternoon, Clara found Rosie behind the house, sitting with a book open on her knees. The pages were worn, the binding cracked. Rosie's finger moved slowly beneath the words, her lips shaping sounds that didn't quite match. Clara sat down a few feet away. Not close. Not threatening. "What are you reading?" "None of your business." "Fair enough." Silence held for 30 seconds. Then Rosie slammed the book shut. "I can't read this word." Clara didn't reach for the book. "Which one?" Rosie opened it again, jabbed her finger at the page. "That one. Courageous. What's it mean?" "Brave, even when you're scared." Rosie looked at the word again. "Courageous," she repeated. Then she closed the book and held it against her chest. "Mama was teaching me before she got sick. Papa tried after, but he doesn't. He's not good at explaining things. Some people teach with words. Some people teach by doing. Your papa teaches by doing." Rosie considered this. "Can you teach with words?" "I was a school teacher for 6 years." Something flickered in Rosie's face. Want. Raw, hungry want. She buried it fast. "Maybe sometimes," Rosie said carefully. "If you're not busy." "I'm never too busy for reading." Rosie stood and walked away, book pressed tight to her chest. At the corner of the house, she stopped. Didn't turn around. "The biscuits were okay," she said. Then she was gone. Clara let out a breath she'd been holding for days. 3 evenings later, Caleb came in from the pasture to find Rosie sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor, the book open between her and Clara. Sam sat nearby, stacking wooden blocks, but his eyes were on Clara's face. Rosie's finger traced a sentence. "The girl walked through the valley without fear, for she knew the mountain would not fall." "Perfect," Clara said. Every word. Rosie's face broke into a grin, so sudden, so bright that Caleb had to look away. He hadn't seen that smile since Martha was alive. It was Martha's smile. Exact. "Papa," Rosie called. "I read a whole paragraph. No mistakes." Caleb leaned against the doorframe. "I heard. You sounded like a professor." "Miss Clara says I'm the fastest learner she's ever had." Caleb looked at Clara. She met his eyes, held them. Something passed between them, not romance, not gratitude, something quieter. Acknowledgement. "Well," Caleb said, clearing his throat, "don't let it go to your head." Rosie was already back in the book. She didn't hear him. She didn't need to. That night after the children slept, Caleb sat on the porch with cold coffee. Clara stepped out, drying her hands on a cloth. "She's smart," Clara said. "Really smart, Caleb. She could go to the schoolhouse in town if town doesn't want us right now." Clara sat down, leaving space between them. "What happened at the mercantile?" Caleb took a long drink. "Mrs. Fenton. She's got a niece she wants to throw at me. And Judge Pritchard's been asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that lead to courtrooms." Clara's hands went still on the cloth. "How bad?" "Bad enough that the storekeeper won't look me in the eye. Bad enough that Tom Wheeler rode past twice yesterday without stopping." Caleb set the cup down. "They're not just talking anymore, Clara. They're building something. A case. Maybe. Against you or against me. Both. Neither. I don't know." He ran his hand through his hair. "Pritchard wants this land. He's wanted it since before Martha died. He offered to buy it 3 times. I said no 3 times. Now he's got a new angle." Clara's voice went hard. "Your children." "My children." The night pressed in around them. Clara twisted the cloth between her fingers. "I've seen this before, Caleb. In Silver Falls. The judge there used the same playbook. Morality, propriety, welfare of the child. It's not about the children. It's never about the children. I know what it's about." "Do you know what he'll do next?" Caleb looked at her. "Tell me." "He'll send someone official. A letter, a visit. He'll document everything. The widow under your roof. The lack of a wife. The state of the house, the children's schooling. He'll stack paper until the pile is high enough to stand on, and then he'll petition the court." "Can he win?" Clara was quiet for too long. In Silver Falls, the judge took 3 children from a widow named Sarah Cobb. She worked honest, kept a clean home, loved those kids more than breath. But she had no husband, no standing, no one willing to stand beside her in that courtroom. Clara looked at Caleb. He won because no one fought. Caleb's fist closed on his knee. "I'll fight." "Fighting alone isn't enough. You need the town." "The town is against me." "The town is scared. There's a difference." Caleb stared at the dark. She was right. He hated that she was right. The next morning, Doc Silas Harper rode up before breakfast. He climbed down from his horse, slow and stiff, the way old men moved when their joints remembered every winter. Caleb met him in the yard. "Doc?" "Caleb." Harper pushed his spectacles up his nose. "I'm not here on a social call." "Never are. Pritchard came to see me yesterday. Asked about your boy, about his condition, whether the child was being properly cared for." Caleb's stomach dropped. "What did you tell him?" "Told him Sam Dawson is healthier than he's been in a year. Told him the boy's eating, sleeping, and showing signs of recovery from his grief." Harper looked toward the house. "Didn't tell him why?" "Doc, I'm not finished." Harper lowered his voice. "Pritchard also asked about the woman, whether she had medical qualifications, whether she'd been administering treatments without authority. She gave him willow bark tea. That's not. I know what it is, and you know what it is. But Pritchard will call it unlicensed practice if it suits him." Harper fixed Caleb with a steady look. "He's building Caleb, brick by brick. What do I do? You get ahead of him. You show this town that your house is in order, that your children are thriving, that Clara Whitfield is an asset to this community, not a scandal." Harper climbed back on his horse. "And you do it before he files that petition." "How long do I have?" "Weeks, maybe less." Harper rode off. Caleb stood in the yard, heat already pressing down, and felt the ground shifting under his feet. Clara appeared on the porch. "I heard." "You hear everything." Thin walls. She came down the steps. "Caleb let me go to town. Let me show them who I am. I can teach. I can help at the church. I can—" They'll tear you apart. They'll try. There's a difference. Caleb studied her face. Stubborn, set. He recognized that look. He wore it himself. Fine, he said. But I'm coming with you. Clara shook her head. No. You come with me, it looks like you're protecting your territory. I go alone, it looks like I have nothing to hide. You don't have anything to hide. Then let me prove it. Caleb wanted to argue. Every instinct told him to keep her close, keep the walls up, keep everyone inside where Pritchard couldn't reach. But Clara was already straightening her dress, already pulling her shoulders back, already becoming the woman who had walked into his barn and saved his son without flinching. Be careful, he said. I'm always careful. No, you're not. You walked into a stranger's barn and picked up his child. That's not careful. Clara almost smiled. That's different. How? That was necessary. She walked down the road alone. Caleb watched until the dust swallowed her. Clara walked into town with her chin up and her heart hammering. She went to the mercantile first. Bought thread salt and a penny candy for Sam. The storekeeper took her money without speaking. His wife watched from behind the curtain. Clara placed her coins on the counter. I'd like to post a notice, she said. I'm offering reading and writing lessons for children, free of charge, Saturday mornings. The storekeeper's eyes widened. Ma'am, I don't think... I was a certified teacher in Colorado Territory, 6 years. I have my papers if anyone would like to see them. The wife stepped out from behind the curtain. You're the woman staying at the Dawson place. I am. People are saying things. People always say things. I'm asking to teach their children to read. That's not a scandal. That's a service. The wife studied Clara for a long moment. Then she took the notice and pinned it to the board. Saturdays, you said, 9 o'clock. My youngest can barely write his name. Bring him. Clara walked out with her supplies and her hammering heart. She passed the church, the stable, the feed store. Eyes followed her. She met every pair. At the corner, she ran into Mrs. Fenton. The older woman blocked the boardwalk. Miss Whitfield, bold of you to show your face. Mrs. Fenton, good morning. Is it... Fenton's eyes narrowed. I understand you've made yourself quite comfortable in Caleb Dawson's home. I work for my keep, same as any hand on any ranch. A ranch hand sleeps in the bunkhouse. A ranch hand doesn't cook breakfast for a man's children. Clara held her ground. Those children needed help. I provided it. And what do you expect in return? Nothing. Nothing. Fenton laughed. Short, ugly. Everyone wants something, Miss Whitfield. Then I want those children fed, clothed, and educated. If that offends you, ma'am, I'm sorry for your standards. Fenton's face went red. You watch yourself. Judge Pritchard takes a particular interest in the welfare of this county's children. Then Judge Pritchard should be glad they're being cared for. Clara stepped around her and walked on. Her hands shook. She fisted them in her skirt and kept walking. 3 days later, Saturday morning came. Clara set up the schoolhouse porch with a borrowed slate, a piece of chalk, and a primer she'd carried in her bag since Colorado. She expected no one. 2 children showed up. Then 4. By 10 o'clock, 8 children sat on the porch, stumbling through letters, sounding out words. Their mothers stood at a distance watching. Not friendly, not hostile, curious. Rosie sat among them, helping the younger ones, her own reading already sharper than most. She didn't introduce herself as Caleb Dawson's daughter. She introduced herself as Miss Rosie. Clara bit back a smile. When the lesson ended, one mother approached. Young tired a baby on her hip. My girl learned more in 1 hour than she has all year, she said quietly. Will you come back next week? Every week, Clara said. Long as you'll have me. The mother hesitated. Then she reached out and touched Clara's arm. Quick, brief. Thank you. Clara nodded. She gathered her slate, took Rosie's hand, and walked home with something new in her chest. Not hope exactly, but the space where hope might grow. Caleb met them in the yard. Rosie ran ahead, chattering about the lesson about how she'd helped a boy named Peter learn the letter R. Caleb listened, his face unreadable. When Rosie went inside, Clara told him the truth. 8 children, 3 mothers watching. Mrs. Fenton's spies were there too, I'm sure. And I taught reading. If that's a crime, let Pritchard come arrest me. Caleb shook his head. Something moved across his face. Admiration, maybe. Fear alongside it. You're poking a bear, Clara. Bears need poking sometimes. That night, Caleb checked the cattle late. The heat hadn't broken. The creek ran lower than he'd ever seen it. Cattle need water. Grass was browning. He counted heads and came up 1 short. He found her at the far fence. Dead. Not from heat. The heifer's mouth was foamed white, her belly swollen wrong. Caleb knelt beside her, touched the ground near the water trough. His fingers came up smelling sharp. Chemical. Wrong. He tested the water in the trough. Then the next one. Then the one by the barn. Poison. 3 out of 4 troughs. Deliberately placed. Caleb's hands started shaking. Not from fear. From rage. He rode the fence line in the dark, checking every trough, every access point. The north fence had been cut. Clean-cut wire, snipped post pushed aside. Someone had come onto his land in the night. He rode home at a gallop, threw open the door. Clara was still awake, mending by lamplight. She saw his face and stood. What happened? Someone poisoned my water troughs. 3 of them. Lost a heifer. Fence was cut on the north side. Clara's face went white. The children? House well is clean, I checked. Are you sure? I'm sure. Caleb paced the kitchen. His boots left dirt on the floor Martha used to keep spotless. This wasn't random. This was planned. Someone walked onto my property, cut my fence, and poisoned my stock. Pritchard. I can't prove it. You don't need proof to know. Caleb slammed his fist on the table. The lamp rattled. Down the hall, Sam whimpered in his sleep. Clara moved to the doorway, listened until Sam settled. Then she turned back. Caleb, think. He wants you angry. He wants you to ride into town and make threats. That gives him everything he needs. So I just let him kill my cattle. You document it. You tell Doc Harper. You tell every rancher within 10 miles. And you make sure everyone knows what happened without saying Pritchard's name. Why not say his name? Because the moment you accuse a judge without proof, you become the aggressor, and he becomes the victim protecting a community from a dangerous, unstable rancher. Clara's voice was steady, hard, certain. I've seen this game, Caleb. Don't play it his way. Caleb stared at her. She was right again. The woman was infuriatingly, relentlessly right. How do you know all this? He asked. Because my husband trusted a powerful man once. Believed the mine was safe because the owner said so. Thomas went down that shaft because he didn't question the man with money. Clara's voice cracked once. Just once. I will never make that mistake again. Caleb sank into the chair. His anger cooled into something harder. Resolve. Tomorrow, he said. I ride to Doc Harper, then to Tom Wheeler, then to every rancher on this side of the valley. And I'll keep those troughs clean and your children safe. Clara. Caleb. Thank you. For all of it. Clara picked up her mending. Her hands were steady again. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. We haven't lost either. She looked at him across the lamplight. He looked back. The moment held. Neither of them moved to break it. Go to sleep, Caleb. Tomorrow's going to be long. He stood, paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, he said quietly, you poke bears pretty well. Clara smiled, real, warm, brief. Go to sleep. He went. But he didn't sleep. He lay in the dark, listening to the house breathe around him, and he thought about a woman who walked into fire without flinching. About a son who spoke her name when he couldn't speak his own grief. About a daughter who was learning to let go of the weight she'd carried alone. And about a judge who had just made the worst mistake of his life. Because Caleb Dawson wasn't broken anymore. He wasn't surviving. He was fighting. And now he wasn't fighting alone. Caleb rode out before dawn. The heat was already building, pressing against his chest as the horse cut through the dry grass. He hit Doc Harper's place first. The old man listened without interrupting, cleaned his spectacles twice, then set them back on his nose. "Poison," Harper said. "You're certain?" "Smelled it myself. Lost a heifer. 3 troughs contaminated." "And the fence was cut?" "Clean. Wire snips. Not an animal, not weather. A man." Harper leaned back in his chair. "Pritchard's been buying land on the East Ridge. 4 parcels this year alone. Paid below value every time." "How?" "Same way. Pressure, problems. Cattle go missing. Wells go dry. Fences break. Owners get tired. Owners sell." Harper met Caleb's eyes. "You're not the first, Caleb. You're just the first one who won't bend." "Who else?" "The Muller family. Lost 30 head in 1 month. Couldn't prove a thing. Sold to Pritchard at half price and moved to Oregon. The Carver widow. Her barn caught fire 3 weeks after she refused his offer. No witnesses." Caleb's blood ran cold. "And nobody said anything." "People said plenty, to each other, over fences, in low voices." Harper stood slowly. "But nobody said it to Pritchard's face. That's the difference between talk and courage. Will you stand with me?" Harper was quiet for a long moment. "I'm an old man, Caleb. I've got no land he wants and no family he can threaten." He held out his hand. "I'll stand." Caleb shook it, firm. Then he rode to Tom Wheeler's ranch. Tom was in the yard mending tack. He saw Caleb coming and straightened up, guilt already written on his face. He knew. Everyone knew. "Before you say anything," Tom started. "Someone poisoned my water, Tom. Cut my fence. Killed a heifer." Tom's hands went still. "Lord. Pritchard's been working this valley ranch by ranch. You know it. I know it. Half this county knows it." Tom looked at the ground. "My wife's brother owes Pritchard money. If I stick my neck out—" "Your neck's already out. You think he'll stop with me? You're next, Tom, or the Hendersons, or anyone else sitting on land he wants." Tom rubbed the back of his neck. Caleb could see the war behind his eyes. Fear on one side, decency on the other. "What are you asking?" Tom said. "I'm asking you to tell the truth if anyone asks. That's all. Just the truth." Tom stared at him. Then he nodded, one sharp dip of his chin. "If anyone asks?" It wasn't much, but it was a start. Caleb hit 4 more ranches that day. Bill Henderson listened and swore under his breath. Frank Avery's wife said they'd been having trouble with their well for months. Old Pete Sampson said he'd seen riders on Caleb's land at night, thought it was Caleb's own hands. Didn't think anything of it. "Think something of it now," Caleb told him. By late afternoon, Caleb had 6 men who would talk if pressed. Not an army. A beginning. He rode home as the sun dropped low. Clara met him at the gate. She read his face before he spoke. "How many?" "6, plus Doc Harper." "That's more than I expected. It's not enough." "It's a crack in the wall, Caleb. Cracks grow." Inside, Rosie was reading aloud to Sam. Her voice was stronger now, more certain. Sam sat on the floor beside her, Martha's blue bowl in his lap, as always, his eyes following Rosie's finger across the page. When Caleb walked in, Sam looked up and lifted one hand. A wave. Small, deliberate. Caleb waved back. His throat tightened. Clara touched his arm as she passed. Quick. Light. Gone before he could register it. "Eat," she said. "You've been riding all day." He ate. The food was good. It was always good now. He hated how natural it felt, Clara moving between the stove and the table, Rosie chattering about the book, Sam's quiet presence anchoring the room. It felt like a family. It felt like betrayal and salvation at the same time. After the children slept, Clara told him what had happened while he was gone. A man came by, didn't give his name, said he was from the county assessor's office, asked about the property, the improvements, the number of people living here. Caleb went rigid. What did you tell him? That questions about property should be directed to the owner, that I was hired help, and that he was trespassing. You said that. I said that. He left, but he wrote something in a notebook before he rode off. Caleb pressed his palms flat on the table. It's starting. It's already started. Caleb, that man wasn't from the assessor's office. I know county paperwork. He didn't have any. Pritchard sent him. Pritchard sent him. They sat in the lamplight, the weight of it settling around them. Clara spoke first. There's something else. While you were gone, Sam drew a picture. Sam doesn't draw. Clara reached into her apron and unfolded a piece of paper. Caleb took it. The drawing was rough, the way a 5-year-old draws stick figures and wobbly lines. But it was clear. A house. A tall figure with a hat. A woman by the stove. 2 small figures between them, and underneath, in shaky, crooked letters that someone had guided his hand to form one word. Family. Caleb stared at it. His vision blurred. He asked me to help him write it, Clara said. He pulled on my sleeve and pointed at the paper and said, us. That's 2 words in 1 week, Caleb. Caleb folded the paper carefully and pressed it against his chest. He couldn't speak. Clara didn't make him. 3 days passed. The heat worsened. Caleb replaced the poisoned water, scrubbed every trough, patrolled the fence line morning and night. Clara kept the house running with a fierceness that bordered on defiance. She cooked bigger, cleaned harder, read louder with Rosie, played longer with Sam. On the 4th morning, the letter arrived. Caleb found it nailed to his gatepost, official seal, typed words. His hands shook as he read. To Mr. Caleb Dawson, the County Court of Madison Valley hereby gives notice of a formal inquiry into the custodial arrangement of minor children, Rosemary Dawson and Samuel Dawson. A hearing will be held on the 14th of August at the Madison Valley Courthouse. Your attendance is required. Failure to appear will result in default judgment regarding the custody and welfare of said minors. Judge Harlan Pritchard presiding. Caleb read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. He walked inside, set the letter on the table. Clara picked it up. Her face drained of color as she read. August 14th, she said. That's 11 days. I know. He's presiding over his own case. That's not legal fair. Since when does he care about fair? Rosie appeared in the doorway. She looked at her father's face, at Clara's white knuckles on the paper. What's wrong? Caleb forced his voice steady. Nothing, sweetheart. You're lying, Papa. Your jaw does that thing when you lie. Clara folded the letter and put it in her pocket. Grown-up trouble, Rosie. Nothing for you to worry about. Is it about the judge? Caleb and Clara exchanged a look. Rosie missed nothing. I heard you talking, Rosie said. Last week, on the porch. I know he wants to take us away. Nobody is taking you anywhere, Caleb said. Then why do you look scared? The question hung in the kitchen like smoke. Caleb knelt down, took Rosie's hands in his. Because I love you, he said. And sometimes love makes people scared. But scared doesn't mean beaten. You understand? Rosie's chin trembled. She held it firm. I understand. Good. Now go read to your brother. He likes the one about the horse. Rosie left. Caleb stood. His knees ached from kneeling, but the pain in his chest was worse. 11 days, Clara said again. I need a lawyer. Can you afford one? No, but I can't afford not to. Caleb rode to town that afternoon. He went to the only attorney in Madison Valley, a man named Wallace Crane. Crane's office sat above the hardware store, small, hot-smelling of old paper and tobacco. Crane was thin, careful, with eyes that calculated before they committed. Custody hearing, Crane said, reading the letter. Pritchard presiding. Can he do that? Technically, as county judge, he has jurisdiction. To challenge it, you'd need to petition the territorial court in Helena. That takes months. I don't have months. I have 11 days. Crane set the letter down. What's your situation, Mr. Dawson? Honestly. Caleb told him. All of it. The ranch, Martha's death, Sam's silence, Clara's arrival, the poison, the fence, the assessor's man, every piece. Crane listened. When Caleb finished, the lawyer leaned back and pressed his fingers together. You have a woman living on your property who is not your wife and not a blood relative. You have a son with documented behavioral concerns. You have a daughter who, by your own account, has been performing duties beyond her age. Crane paused. And you have a judge who wants your land and will use your children to get it. That's about right. Mr. Dawson, I'll be straight with you. In a fair court, you'd win this in an hour. Your children are fed healthy and improving. But this isn't a fair court. Pritchard controls the bench, the docket, and half the witnesses. So it's hopeless. I didn't say that. Crane pulled a sheet of paper forward. I said it's not fair. Unfair fights can still be won. They just need a different strategy. What strategy? Public opinion. Pritchard's power depends on the town's silence. If the town speaks up, if enough people stand in that courtroom and say what they've seen, Pritchard can't ignore it without exposing himself. A judge who overrides his own community invites investigation from Helena. And if he doesn't care, then we appeal to the territorial court immediately, on grounds of judicial conflict of interest. That takes months. But the filing itself creates a record. And a record makes Pritchard vulnerable. Men like Pritchard survive on shadows. Drag them into light and they burn. Caleb leaned forward. How much? $5 for the hearing. Another $10 if we go to Helena. Caleb had $7 to his name. The rest was tied up in cattle and feed in keeping 2 children alive through a Montana summer. He thought of Sam's drawing. Family. I'll find it, Caleb said. You're hired. He rode home fast. His mind raced faster. 11 days. 6 ranchers willing to talk. 1 lawyer, 1 doctor, 1 schoolteacher who'd already turned half the town's children into her students. Clara met him at the porch. He told her everything. She listened with her hands clasped in her lap, knuckles white. Public opinion, she repeated. That's what Crane says. Clara stood, paced, stopped. The Saturday lessons. 9 mothers have brought their children now. 3 of those mothers talked to me after. Really talked. About their lives, their struggles, their children's futures. And 2 of them told me Pritchard raised their taxes last year without explanation. One said he blocked her husband's water rights. Clara turned to Caleb. He's not just coming for you. He's squeezing the whole valley. People are angry, Caleb. They're just too scared to show it. Can you reach them? I can try, but not from here. I need to be in town, visible, present. That's dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. You taught me that a man can be terrified and still do the right thing. That's the most dangerous lesson of all. Caleb looked at her. Clara Whitfield, who'd walked out of a mining camp with nothing but a bag and a broken heart. Who'd knelt in the dirt beside a stranger's son and fought death with willow bark. Who'd faced Mrs. Fenton on a public street and didn't blink. Saturday, he said. The next lesson. I want to be there. Caleb. Not to protect you. To show them I'm not hiding. Clara considered. Then she nodded. Saturday. The days between felt like years. Caleb worked the ranch. Clara cooked cleaned red, with Rosie drew pictures with Sam. Every evening she wrote letters. Careful, thoughtful letters to each mother whose child attended her lessons. She wrote about education, about opportunity, about what children deserved. She didn't mention Pritchard. She didn't have to. Thursday night, Rosie found Caleb on the porch. She sat down beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. Papa. Yeah. If the judge takes us, where would we go? Caleb's heart cracked. Nobody's taking you. But if they did... Rosie, look at me. She did. Her eyes were dry, clear, old. I will burn this county to the ground before I let anyone take you and Sam. Do you hear me? Rosie searched his face. Whatever she found there satisfied her. She leaned against his shoulder. Okay, Papa. Okay. Papa? Yeah. I think Mama sent Clara to us. Caleb couldn't breathe. Why do you say that? Because Sam talks now. Because I can read whole chapters. Because you don't sit in the dark anymore. Rosie picked at a thread on her dress. Mama always said God sends help in strange packages. Clara's a pretty strange package. Caleb laughed. It hurt. It felt good. Yeah, she is. I was wrong to be mean to her. You were scared. I was mean. You were both. That's allowed. Rosie was quiet for a moment. I'm going to tell her I'm sorry. Tomorrow. She'd like that. And Papa. Rosie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Don't let the judge win, please. Caleb put his arm around his daughter and pulled her close. He felt her ribs through her dress. She was still too thin, still carrying too much, but she was alive and fierce and reading chapter books, and she had her mother's smile and her father's stubborn jaw. I won't, he said. I promise. Saturday arrived white-hot and merciless. Caleb put on his clean shirt. Clara wore her best dress, the one she'd mended 3 times. Rosie braided her own hair, then braided Sam's, which made him giggle a sound so rare and perfect that everyone in the house went still to hear it. They rode to town together, all 4 of them on the wagon seat. Sam sat in Clara's lap, holding Martha's blue bowl. He'd refused to leave it behind. Rosie sat straight as a post between Caleb and Clara, chin up, fists tight. The schoolhouse porch was already full. Not 8 children this time, 14. And their mothers stood closer now, not at a distance. Some had brought chairs. One brought lemonade. Clara stepped down from the wagon, and the children ran to her. Miss Clara. Miss Clara. She laughed, knelt down, touched their heads, greeted each one by name. Caleb lifted Sam down. The boy stayed close, clutching his bowl, watching the other children with wide eyes. Rosie jumped down on her own and walked straight to a cluster of girls. I'm Miss Rosie, she announced. I'm the assistant teacher today. Clara shot Caleb a look. Caleb shrugged. The lesson began. Clara taught with a warmth and authority that made even Caleb lean in. She made the children laugh. She made them think. She praised without flattering, corrected without shaming. Mothers watched with softening faces. Then Mrs. Fenton arrived. She came in a buggy, Judge Pritchard beside her. They didn't get down. They sat in the shade across the street and watched. Clara saw them. Her voice didn't waver. She kept teaching. Caleb felt every muscle in his body tighten. He forced himself to stay still. Don't react. Don't give them anything. Pritchard watched for 10 minutes. Then he spoke to Fenton, something low that made her nod. He tipped his hat toward the schoolhouse porch, a gesture that wasn't greeting, but warning, and drove away. The mothers noticed. A murmur passed through the group. Clara finished the lesson, thanked the children, and began packing up. A woman named Margaret Holloway approached. She was large, plain-spoken, with hands rougher than most men's. Her husband ran the feed store. She planted herself in front of Clara like a fence post. "Judge just sat there watching like we're criminals," Margaret said. "He watched," Clara agreed. "My boy Tommy's been reading at home for the first time. First time ever. His daddy cried." Clara's eyes softened. "Tommy works hard." "Miss Whitfield," Margaret lowered her voice, "I know what Pritchard's doing to the Dawson family. Half this town knows, and I know what he did to the Mullers and the Carvers." Clara went very still. "Margaret, my husband's afraid. Most of the men are. But I'm not a man." Margaret's chin lifted. "You tell Caleb Dawson that Margaret Holloway will stand in that courtroom on August 14th. And if my husband won't stand beside me, he can sleep in the barn." Clara reached out and squeezed Margaret's hand. No words. None needed. On the ride home, Caleb held the reins with hands that ached from gripping. Clara sat beside him, Sam asleep in her arms, Rosie dozing against her shoulder. "Margaret Holloway," Clara said. "I heard. That's one more." One more. Clara shifted Sam's weight. The boy's hand curled into her collar and held on. "Caleb, there's something I need to tell you." His gut clenched. "What?" "Sam spoke again today, while you were watching Pritchard." "What did he say?" Clara's voice broke for the first time, not in grief, in wonder. "He was sitting with the other children. Tommy Holloway shared his slate. Sam took the chalk and wrote his letters, all of them, A through Z. Tommy said, 'Good job.' And Sam looked at him and said, 'My mama taught me.'" Caleb pulled the horses up. The wagon stopped in the middle of the road. Dust settled around them. He said it clear, every word, and then he went back to writing, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Caleb pressed his fist against his mouth. His whole body shook. Sam, his silent, broken boy, who hadn't strung 4 words together in 18 months, had sat among strangers and spoken about his mother like she was still right there beside him. Clara put her free hand over Caleb's fist. "He's coming back, Caleb. Your boy is coming back." Caleb couldn't speak. He sat there on that wagon, in the middle of a dusty road, with his sleeping children and a woman who had no reason to stay, but every reason to love, and he let the tears come. He didn't wipe them, didn't hide them, just let them fall into the dust and disappear. Clara held his hand and said nothing more. The horses stood patient. Sam slept. Sam, Rosie dreamed. And somewhere behind them, a town was beginning to remember what courage looked like. 7 days until the hearing. Caleb drove the wagon home through the falling light and did not once look back. 7 days turned to 5. 5 turned to 3. Caleb worked the ranch like a man possessed, fixing what didn't need fixing. Counting cattle, he'd already counted riding fence lines until his horse was lathered and spent. Clara watched him burn through the hours and said nothing. She knew what he was doing. She'd done it herself after Thomas died. When grief or fear gets too big for the body, you move. You work. You exhaust yourself into something resembling calm. Lawyer Crane came out to the ranch on the 5th evening. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of Clara's coffee and laid out the situation plain. Pritchard filed a formal petition. Grounds are moral unsuitability and child neglect. Neglect. Caleb spat the word. "My children are fed, clothed, healthy." "I know, but neglect is a broad term in territorial law. He's arguing that Sam's delayed speech constitutes evidence of inadequate care, and that Rosie's assumption of adult responsibilities proves parental failure." Clara's hand tightened on the back of a chair. "Rosie stepped up because her mother died. That's not failure, that's survival." "I agree, Miss Whitfield, but I won't be the one ruling." Crane spread papers across the table. "Here's what we have. Doc Harper will testify to the children's physical health and Sam's improvement. 6 ranchers are willing to speak to Caleb's character. Margaret Holloway and 2 other mothers will testify about your teaching and the children's progress." "Will it be enough?" Caleb asked. Crane hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Pritchard has Mrs. Fenton, who'll testify about impropriety. He has the assessor's man, who'll describe an unmarried woman living in a single man's household. And he has himself, on the bench, making the final ruling. So he's judge and prosecutor, Clara said. Effectively, yes. And that's legal. In this county, at this moment, it's the reality. Crane gathered his papers. Our best weapon is numbers. The more people in that courtroom, the harder it is for Pritchard to act in shadow. Get everyone you can. After Crane left, Caleb sat alone at the table. Clara put the children to bed, then came back and stood in the doorway. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about what happens if we lose." "We won't." "If we lose Clara, where do they go?" "Some stranger's house, an orphanage in Helena." His voice cracked. "Sam just started talking again. Rosie just started being a child again. If they take them—" "Caleb, stop!" He looked up. Clara crossed the room and sat across from him. Her eyes were fierce. "I have watched men crumble before fights they hadn't lost yet. My husband did it. The night before a hard shift, he'd pace and worry and plan for the worst until he couldn't see the best anymore. And you know what I told him?" "What?" "Survive first, grieve later." Caleb held her gaze. Something steadied inside him. Not hope. Steel. "Survive first," he repeated. "Grieve later." "There won't be anything to grieve. I'll make sure of it." Clara nodded. "Then get some sleep. You'll need your voice sharp on the 14th. The morning of the hearing, Caleb dressed in his only suit. It was Martha's favorite. She'd sewn the buttons herself. He stood in front of the small mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Thinner, harder, older. But his eyes were clear. Rosie appeared behind him, already dressed, hair braided tight. "I'm coming," she said. "Rosie." "I'm coming, Papa. It's my family, too." Caleb turned. His daughter stood with her shoulders squared, chin lifted, Martha's stubborn fire burning in every line of her face. Behind her, Sam held Clara's hand. He was wearing his good shirt, Martha's blue bowl, tucked under his free arm. "He won't leave it," Clara said softly. "Let him bring it," Caleb said. "Let them see what matters to him." They rode to town in silence. The heat crushed down from a white sky. Dust coated the wagon wheels. Caleb's hands ached on the reins. The courthouse was a squat wooden building at the end of Main Street. Caleb pulled up and stared. People were already gathering. Not a handful, dozens. More than he'd ever seen at any town meeting. They stood in clusters, talking low, fanning themselves against the heat. Margaret Holloway saw them first. She walked over, took Clara's hand as she climbed down, and squeezed it hard. 12 mothers, Margaret said, and 8 of their husbands. Tommy wouldn't let his daddy stay home. Caleb looked at the crowd. He saw Doc Harper near the door. Tom Wheeler, hat in his hands, looking nervous, but present. Bill Henderson, Frank Avery, old Pete Sampson. The storekeeper's wife. Faces he knew. Faces he'd passed on the street for years without really seeing. They were here. For him. For his children. Crane met them at the door. "Courtroom's full. Standing room only." He looked at Caleb. "That's a good sign." Or Pritchard brought his own crowd. He didn't. I checked. They walked in. The room was stifling, bodies pressed together on wooden benches. Caleb led his family to the front. Clara sat beside him, Rosie on his other side, Sam on Clara's lap bowl clutched tight. Pritchard entered from the side door. He wore a black coat despite the heat. His face was composed, careful, the face of a man who'd planned every move. Mrs. Fenton sat in the front row behind him, gloved hands folded, smile thin. Pritchard took the bench. Gavelled once. The room fell silent. This hearing concerns the custodial fitness of Mr. Caleb Dawson regarding his minor children Rosemary and Samuel Dawson. Pritchard's voice was smooth measured. The court has received concerns from citizens about the welfare and moral environment of the Dawson household. Crane stood. Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to note for the record that you have a documented personal interest in the Dawson property. 3 purchase offers in the past 2 years all declined. I move that you recuse yourself. The room stirred. Pritchard's jaw tightened. Denied. Those transactions are unrelated to child welfare. Proceed. Noted for the record, Crane said calmly. The defense will reference this denial in any appeal to the territorial court. Pritchard's eyes flickered. First crack. Caleb felt it. Mrs. Fenton took the stand first. She spoke with practiced concern about propriety, about the scandal of an unmarried woman living under a single man's roof, about the example being set for impressionable children. And in your opinion, Pritchard asked, does this arrangement serve the children's best interests? It certainly does not. A child needs a proper mother, not a drifter. Clara flinched, just once. Caleb saw it. His fist closed on his knee. Crane cross-examined. Mrs. Fenton, have you visited the Dawson home? I have not. Have you spoken with either child? No. Have you observed Miss Whitfield's conduct firsthand? I've heard reports. From whom? Fenton's mouth tightened. Concerned citizens. Named. I'd rather not say. So your testimony is based entirely on second-hand gossip from anonymous sources. It is based on Christian concern for... Thank you, Mrs. Fenton. The assessor's man followed. He testified about the living arrangements, the woman's presence, the lack of formal employment agreement. Crane dismantled him in 3 questions. Are you employed by the county assessor's office? I do contract work. Who contracted you for this visit? Silence. The man glanced at Pritchard. Who contracted you? Crane repeated. Judge Pritchard's office. A murmur swept the room. Pritchard gabbled it down. Doc Harper took the stand next. His voice carried the weight of 40 years of practice. I have examined both Dawson children within the past month. Rosemary is in excellent health. Strong, well-nourished, sharp as a tack. Samuel has shown remarkable improvement. His speech, which was severely impacted by grief following his mother's death, has begun to return. He is eating well, sleeping well, and engaging with the world again. And to what do you attribute this improvement? Crane asked. Harper looked directly at Clara. The steady, competent, compassionate care of Miss Clara Whitfield. In your medical opinion, removing Miss Whitfield from the household would be devastating, particularly for Samuel. The boy has formed a critical attachment. Disrupting it now could cause regression that might take years to recover from, if it recovers at all. Pritchard leaned forward. Dr. Harper, are you qualified to make psychological assessments? I'm qualified to know a thriving child when I see one, and I'm qualified to know when a sick one is getting better. Margaret Holloway stood without being called. I'd like to speak. Pritchard frowned. This is not an open forum. Your Honor, Crane said, these are character witnesses. They have a right to be heard. Pritchard looked at the crowd, at the faces watching him, calculating. Briefly, he said. Margaret gripped the rail. My boy Tommy couldn't read his own name 3 months ago. Now he reads at the dinner table. Miss Whitfield did that, for free, every Saturday morning, giving her time, her patience, her heart to children who aren't even hers. If that's the kind of woman you call unfit, then this court doesn't know the meaning of the word. A rancher stood behind her, then another mother, then Frank Avery's wife. One by one they spoke. About Clara, about what she'd done for their children, about what she'd done for the Dawson family. Each voice built on the last. Each testimony, a brick in a wall Pritchard couldn't climb. Tom Wheeler stood last. His voice shook, but held. I've been afraid to speak up, afraid of what it might cost me. But I watched Caleb Dawson's boy eat from his mama's bowl and say his first words in a year and a half. If this court takes that away, then we're not protecting children. We're punishing a man for loving his kids enough to accept help." The room was silent, heavy, electric. Pritchard's face had gone the color of old paper. He shuffled documents, stalled. "The court will take a brief recess." "Your Honor," Crane said, still standing. "Before you recess, I'd like to submit one additional piece of evidence." Pritchard's eyes narrowed. "What evidence?" Crane held up a piece of paper. Sam's drawing, the stick figures, the crooked letters, family. This was drawn by Samuel Dawson, 5 years old. A boy who did not speak, did not draw, did not engage with the world for 18 months after his mother's death. He drew this 1 week ago. He asked Miss Whitfield to help him write the word. Crane held it up so the room could see. He wrote family, and he meant every person in this courtroom who showed up today. A woman in the back row started crying, then another. Margaret Holloway's husband, a big silent man who hadn't said a word, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Pritchard stared at the drawing. Something moved behind his eyes. Not conscience. Calculation. He was losing, and he knew it. "The court will recess for 15 minutes, he said, and left through the side door. Caleb stood. His legs felt hollow. Clara took his arm. Rosie pressed against his side. Sam sat perfectly still, Martha's bowl in his lap, watching the door where Pritchard had disappeared. Crane leaned close. "He's going to try to save face. He'll look for a way out that doesn't make him look defeated. And if he doesn't find one, then he rules against you, and we appeal immediately. But Caleb, look at this room. He can't rule against you without ruling against the entire town. And a judge who turns his back on his own community doesn't stay a judge for long." 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. Then Pritchard returned. His face was a mask. He sat, gavelled. "In the matter of Dawson," he said slowly, "the court has considered all testimony and evidence presented." He paused. The room held its breath. "It is the finding of this court that the minor children Rosemary and Samuel Dawson are in no immediate danger. The custodial arrangement shall remain as is." Another pause. "The petition is dismissed." The room erupted, not cheering. Something deeper, relief that rumbled through the benches like distant thunder. Margaret Holloway grabbed her husband's arm. Doc Harper closed his eyes and nodded. Tom Wheeler let out a breath that seemed to empty his whole body. Clara's hand found Caleb's under the table. She gripped it so hard her knuckles went white. Caleb gripped back. Rosie looked up at her father. "We won. We won." The judge looked angry. The judge can look however he wants. Pritchard stood and left without another word. Mrs. Fenton followed, her face rigid with fury. The side door closed behind them, with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Outside, the heat hit them like a wall. People gathered around, shaking Caleb's hand, touching Clara's shoulder, bending down to smile at Sam. The boy pressed closer to Clara and held his bowl tight, but he didn't hide. He looked at each face that came near, and he didn't look away. Margaret Holloway pulled Clara into a hug that lifted her off the ground. "You did it, girl." "We all did it," Clara said, laughing, crying both at once. Doc Harper shook Caleb's hand with both of his. "Your wife would be proud, Caleb. Both of them would." Caleb couldn't answer. He just held on. Crane approached last. He shook Caleb's hand, then leaned close. He dismissed the petition. He didn't drop the grudge. "Watch your back." "I know. He'll come at the land next. Different angle. Be ready." Caleb nodded. The victory was real, but it wasn't total. Pritchard was wounded, not dead. Wounded animals were the most dangerous kind. But today, right now, his children were safe. Clara was beside him, and a town that had been too afraid to speak had found its voice. On the ride home, Rosie fell asleep against Clara's shoulder. Sam sat in Caleb's lap, one hand on the reins, pretending to drive. The bowl sat between them on the wagon seat. Clara spoke quietly. "Caleb, yeah, I need to tell you something. His stomach dropped. What? When Pritchard called the recess, I was ready to run. Pack my bag, disappear. Take the problem with me. I had it planned. Out the back door, down the alley, gone before you knew. Caleb looked at her. Why didn't you? Clara touched Sam's hair where it curled against his neck. Because this little boy was holding his mama's bowl and looking at the door like he was waiting for the next person to leave him. And I made a promise. What promise? The morning I came back, when Rosie grabbed my sleeve. I promised myself I would never give another child a reason to watch someone walk away. Caleb's throat closed. He drove on in silence, one hand on the reins, the other resting on the seat between them. Clara's hand found his. Their fingers laced together, rough skin against rough skin, and neither one let go until the house came into view, standing solid against the evening sky, waiting for them the way it always did. Sam pointed. Home, he said. Third word, clear as a bell. Caleb smiled, felt it crack his whole face open. Yeah, buddy, home. The days after the hearing moved differently. Slower, gentler, like the whole valley had exhaled a breath it didn't know it was holding. Caleb still rose before dawn, still worked the land until his muscles screamed, but the weight behind his ribs had shifted. It wasn't gone. Men like Caleb didn't lose their weight. They just learned to carry it standing up. Clara noticed the change first. Not in what Caleb did, but in how he did it. He lingered at breakfast. He listened longer when Rosie read aloud. He sat on the floor with Sam and stacked blocks without looking at the clock. Small things. The kind of things that build a life so quietly you don't notice until you try to imagine living without them. One evening, Caleb came in from the barn and found Clara at Martha's sewing table. She had a piece of fabric in her hands, but she wasn't sewing. She was just sitting there, fingers resting on the wood eyes somewhere far away. You okay? Caleb asked. Clara startled. Fine, just thinking. About what? She smoothed the fabric. Thomas used to come home from the mine and wash his hands 3 times. Every night. 3 times. I used to tease him about it. Her voice was steady but thin like a wire pulled taut. I can't remember the sound of his voice anymore, Caleb. I try and I can't find it. Caleb sat down across from her. He didn't reach for her hand, he just sat. Martha hummed when she cooked, he said. I remember that. But I can't remember the tune, just the feeling of it. Clara looked at him. Does it scare you? Forgetting. Used to. Now I think maybe that's how grief makes room. Not by erasing, by softening. Clara pressed her lips together. Nodded once. Then she picked up the needle and started sewing. Caleb watched her hands move sure and steady, and he thought about how strange it was that 2 broken people could sit together and make something whole. The next week, Crane rode out with news. He dismounted slow, took off his hat, and Caleb knew immediately something had shifted. Pritchard's been investigated, Crane said. The territorial court in Helena opened an inquiry. Turns out our appeal filing triggered a review of his land acquisitions, the Muller sale, the Carver property, 3 other parcels. Caleb's chest tightened. And he's been buying through a shell company. His own rulings facilitated the sales. Tax liens he created, water rights, he blocked all of it leading back to properties he wanted. Crane shook his head. It's not just corruption, Caleb. It's systematic theft. He's been gutting this valley 1 ranch at a time. What happens now? He's been suspended pending a full investigation. They're sending a new judge from Helena next month, and the families he pushed out are being contacted about restitution. Caleb leaned against the fence post. His legs felt weak. It's over. His power is. Whether he faces criminal charges depends on Helena. But he's done in this county. Clara stood on the porch listening. When Crane rode off, she walked to Caleb. He told her everything. The Mullers, Clara said quietly. The Carvers. All of them. All of them. Clara closed her eyes. In Silver Falls, the judge who took Sarah Cobb's children was never investigated, never questioned. He retired with a pension, and those children grew up in an institution. She opened her eyes. You did what no one in Silver Falls could do. You stood up and the ground moved. I didn't do it alone. No, you didn't. Clara smiled, sad and proud at the same time. Martha would be so angry at you for taking so long. Caleb laughed, a real laugh, rough and raw and startled out of him. She'd be furious. She'd say I should have punched Pritchard on day one. Smart woman. The smartest. They stood there in the yard, the heat pressing down the silence between them, full of things that needed saying. Caleb felt them stacking up behind his teeth. He swallowed them back. Not yet. Not like this. But Clara saw. She always saw. When you're ready, she said. I'm not going anywhere. She went inside. Caleb stayed in the yard and listened to his heart pound like a man half his age. That Saturday, Clara held her reading lesson, and 22 children came. 22. Mothers brought food, set up tables, turned it into something that looked remarkably like a community. Rosie organized the younger children with a bossy efficiency that made Clara hide a laugh behind her hand. Sam sat in the middle of a group of boys his age, not speaking much, but present. Included. Holding his bowl and watching everything with those wide, serious eyes. A new mother approached Clara after the lesson. She was young, barely 20, with a bruise fading yellow along her jaw. She didn't give her name. Can you teach me too? She asked. I never learned proper. Clara took her hand. Every Saturday. Bring yourself. That's all you need. The girl's eyes filled. She nodded and left quickly, head down, arms wrapped around herself. Clara watched her go. Then she turned to Caleb, and the look on her face was something he'd never seen before. Not sadness, not anger. Purpose. The kind that burned clean and didn't go out. I want to start a real school, Clara said. Not just Saturday lessons. A proper school. For everyone. Children, adults, anyone who wants to learn. Clara, this town doesn't even have a schoolhouse. Then we build one. Caleb stared at her. She stared back. Stubborn, certain, on fire with something bigger than either of them. You're serious. I'm always serious. Where? The old feed barn on Henderson's property. He said I could have it for nothing if I fixed the roof. You already asked Henderson. I asked Henderson, Margaret Holloway, and Doc Harper. They're in. Tom Wheeler offered lumber. Frank Avery's wife can teach arithmetic. Caleb shook his head slowly, not in refusal, in wonder. You've been planning this. I've been planning this since the first Saturday, since Tommy Holloway's father cried because his boy could read. Clara Whitfield, you are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. Second most. Rosie's gaining on me. Caleb looked at his daughter across the yard, organizing children like a tiny general, her mother's fire blazing in every gesture. Yeah, he said. She is. 3 weeks later, the school opened. It wasn't much. Patched roof, borrowed desks, a blackboard Clara built herself from sanded planks and leftover paint. But it was real. 31 students on the first day. Ages 5 to 53. Clara stood at the front and felt something click into place, the piece of herself she'd lost in that mining camp in the ashes of her old life. Rosie was her assistant. Official. Clara made her a badge from a flattened penny, and Rosie wore it every single day, pinned to her collar like a medal of honor. Sam attended class. He sat in the front row, Martha's bowl under his desk, and he wrote his letters in careful lines. He didn't speak often, but when he did, the words were real and chosen, and landed with the weight of something hard won. One afternoon, Sam raised his hand. Clara called on him, heart hammering the way it always did when Sam volunteered. Miss Clara, Sam said. His voice was stronger now, less fragile, though still quiet. How do you spell courage? Clara's breath caught. She turned to the blackboard and wrote it out. COURAGE. E. Courageous, Rosie said from the back. It means brave even when you're scared. Sam nodded seriously. He wrote the word in his notebook, tongue pressed between his lips in concentration. Then he looked up. That's what Papa is, Sam said. Courageous. The room went still. 31 students, from 5-year-olds to grandmothers, sat in silence and listened to a boy who had spent 18 months trapped inside his own grief say his father's name with pride. Clara turned away from the class. Just for a second. Just long enough to press her hand over her mouth and breathe. That night, Clara told Caleb. He sat on the porch step and didn't speak for a long time. The evening cooled around them, the first real break from the summer heat carrying the faintest edge of autumn. He said that, in front of everyone. Caleb pressed his palms against his eyes. His shoulders shook. Clara sat beside him, close enough to touch, and waited. I'm not courageous, he said. I'm terrified half the time. That's what courage is. Rosie told you that weeks ago. Caleb dropped his hands, looked at her, really looked. At the woman who'd walked onto his land with nothing and given his children everything. Who'd faced down a corrupt judge in a hostile town and never once backed down. Who'd built a school from splinters and stubbornness and changed a valley's future because a boy's father cried at his kitchen table. Clara. Caleb. I've been trying to find the right time to say this. There isn't one, so I'm just going to say it. Clara went very still. I love you. Not because you saved my son. Not because you taught my daughter to read. Not because you cook or clean or built a school out of nothing. He took her hands. Calloused against calloused. Rough against rough. I love you because when I look at you, I see the rest of my life. And for the first time since Martha died, the rest of my life doesn't scare me. Clara's eyes filled. She didn't look away. Caleb Dawson. I have been waiting for you to say that since the morning you chased me down a dirt road in your boots. That long. That long. You could have said something. It wasn't mine to say. It was yours to find. He leaned forward and kissed her. Gentle, brief, like a door opening for the first time in years. When he pulled back, Clara's hand was on his face, warm and certain. I want to marry you, Caleb said. If you'll have me. If you'll have us. I already have you, Clara said. The paper just makes it official. They told the children in the morning. Rosie took it with characteristic directness. Finally, she said, arms crossed. I've been waiting forever. Sam looked from Caleb to Clara and back. Then he climbed off his chair, walked to Clara, and placed Martha's blue bowl in her hands. For you, he said. For our family. Clara held the bowl against her chest and cried. Not delicate tears, real ones, the kind that wash you clean. The wedding was small, under the cottonwood by Martha's grave because Clara insisted. She said Martha should be there. She said love didn't compete, it gathered. Doc Harper stood as witness. Margaret Holloway brought food for 30. Tom Wheeler played fiddle so badly that Rosie covered her ears, and Sam laughed a full rolling little boy laugh that carried across the yard and echoed off the hills. Caleb spoke his vows plain. No poetry, no performance. I promise to show up, every day, in the hard and the easy, until there's no more days left. Clara spoke hers the same way. I promise to stay, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because there's nowhere else I want to be. Rosie stood between them, holding Sam's hand. When the vows were done, she looked up at Clara. You're my mama now, Rosie said. For real. Clara knelt down, took Rosie's face in her hands. For real. Forever. No matter what. Even when I'm stubborn. Especially when you're stubborn. Rosie grinned. Martha's grin. Wide and fierce and unbreakable. Sam tugged Clara's sleeve. She turned to him. He reached up and touched her face, the same gesture he'd made the morning she'd tried to leave, that moth-wing touch that had brought her back. "Mama," he said. Clear, certain, chosen. Clara pulled both children against her and held on. Caleb stepped forward and wrapped his arms around all three of them. The cottonwood rustled overhead. Martha's stone stood quiet in the grass, tended and flowering, never forgotten, never feared. Months later, on a cool autumn evening, the family sat on the porch. Rosie read aloud from a new book, her voice confident and strong. Sam drew pictures on his slate, animals and houses and stick figures with big smiles. Clara leaned against Caleb's shoulder, her hands still for once just resting. "Caleb," she said quietly. "Yeah. I need to tell you something." He looked at her. She was smiling in a way he hadn't seen before. Nervous and radiant and terrified all at once. "I'm pregnant." The word landed like sunlight. Caleb's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Clara watched him, waiting, her hand moving to her stomach. Rosie's book snapped shut. "I knew it." "You did not," Clara said. "You've been eating pickles with honey. Nobody does that unless they're having a baby. Mama did the same thing with Sam." Caleb found his voice. "You're sure?" "Doc Harper confirmed it yesterday." "And you waited until now to tell me?" "I wanted to tell you here, on this porch, where everything started." Caleb pulled her close. He pressed his forehead against hers and breathed. Just breathed. "Sam," Rosie announced, "you're going to be a big brother." Sam looked up from his slate. He considered this information with the gravity of a judge. Then he held up his drawing. 4 stick figures, a house, and in the center a 5th figure. Tiny, round, new. "I already knew," Sam said. Clara laughed through her tears. "How?" Sam pointed at his drawing. "I made room." Caleb looked at his family, at Rosie, fierce and brilliant, who had carried a household on her 9-year-old back and never once broke. At Sam, who had walked through silence and found his way back to words, to trust, to love. At Clara, who had arrived with nothing but a leather pouch and a broken heart, and built a school and a family and a future from the wreckage of grief. And at Martha, whose blue bowl sat on the kitchen table full of late summer peaches, still at the center of everything. Love didn't replace love. It layered it. Loss didn't end a story. It began a new one. And family wasn't something you were born into. It was something you built plank by plank, word by word, choice by choice, until the house stood strong enough to hold everyone who belonged inside. Caleb Dawson had learned that the hard way. He wouldn't have learned it any other. The evening settled around them warm and steady. Rosie opened her book again. Sam went back to drawing. Clara hummed softly an old tune with no name, the kind that lived in the bones of every mother who ever rocked a child to sleep. And Caleb leaned back, heart full, eyes clear, hands open, and let himself believe that the life they had chosen was the life they deserved. Because it was, and it always had been.